Hey friend, in this video I want to share with you what I believe to be 80% of the mix. If you get this right, I think you get a lot of things right. And when using these two tools, it's the volume knob and the pan knob. When we use these initially, it's called the static mix. And I want to share with you 3 ways of getting a good static mix. 2 ways for beginners and 1 way for the advanced. So let's dive straight into it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Ole Petter Myhren and I'm a mix engineer, music producer, and a teacher. And this channel is all about making music sound as good as possible. And this video is part of an 8-part series where I mix a song from start to finish, where the first part is all the audio terms that you will meet when talking and discussing mixing. And the second part is about setting up the mix. And this is the 3rd part of the series where I set up the static mix. And if you want my whole mixing process laid out in a simple PDF, I got the mixing guide, the link is in the description, where I show you my 10-step mixing process that I use every time I mix a song, and 15 cheat codes to a better mix, plus some bonuses. So you want to grab that. Link is in the description. So what is a static mix? A static mix is a mix where you make the song sound as good as possible without any movement. That is compression, sidechaining, automation, and all that stuff. The static mix is all about making the song sound as good as possible without any processing or moving parts, as you can say. So the only tools we use is the fader knob and the pan button. Here comes method number 1. Basically what we do here is we turn down all the faders. We turn them all the way down so there's no sound. Then we turn up the kick, and then we make sure that the kick peaks around -6 dB. Actually, a little lower is also preferred. You check the master level, right? And then you turn up the snare, the hi-hat, and so on until you have everything going on in the mix. And that's the simplest way to do it. It's time consuming, but simple. What you do next is that you take the gain of the region and then you adjust it accordingly so that you can have your channel faders all at 0, at unity gain. The reason you want all the faders at unity gain is that the resolution is best there. If you want to turn it up 1 decibel, you have to actually turn it up quite a bit to reach 1 decibel. You can do half decibel increments without any struggles. When your fader is all the way down there, it's harder to make detailed tweaks. Now, when you've done all of this, you should have a good static mix. And what you do next is to experiment with the pan buttons. I usually leave the kick and the snare alone, or sometimes if I have more than 1 snare playing at once, I would like to pan them a bit out. Hi-hat can be panned a bit, perks can be panned. And as a rule of thumb for beginners is to think that the higher up in the frequency spectrum you go, the more you can pan. But that's not a hard and fast rule. You can experiment. And there's no shame in having width all the way down to 100 Hertz. There's no shame. No shame at all. We would like to have kick, the sub bass, and the lead vocal dead center, and also the snare, and everything else should be to the sides in not necessarily hard pan left and right, but they should live in the sides. And what I like to do when I pan is I think complementary. For example, if I have a guitar that is occupying the same frequency range as, for example, a piano, I would like to pan them to each side so they can fill each other out. And the same goes for synths and for pads, and backing vocals, for example, are typical tracks that I would like to pan out in the stereo spectrum on the left and on the right. So that's method number 1. Now comes method number 2, and that's the pink noise trick. Many people subscribe to this trick. Me personally, I don't like it so much. I think it removes a bit of the judgment and the art of it, but it's a good thing to use to check, and you can even use this method after you have used method number 1, and you can just apply it to check if there's anything poking out, because when you're new to mixing, it's hard to hear when things are poking out in a mix, but this makes it really clear. So it's really simple. You just take a pink noise generator. I think if every DAW have a stock one, but you can also download this free plugin. The link is in the description where you can get some pink noise, and then you just insert it so that it runs off to the master bus after all the other instruments, so that it will lay on top of everything. And then you turn that pink noise up so loud that you can't hear any of the music, and then you turn it a bit down again. And then you start hearing some vocals, you start hearing some of the other elements. It's noise all over the frequency range, all the way from the bottom all the way to the top, and it's distributed evenly so that whenever there's an instrument or transients or whatever, you could hear it if they poke out of the mix. And if you hear an element that is louder than the other elements, you can always try to turn that down until you got a balance where you only slightly hear everything that you're supposed to hear. And then you turn the noise generator off and see how it is. At least this is a starting point, but make sure to use some sensible judgments. There's no hard and fast rules. I'll repeat it many times. I think it's important. If you've had any value out of this video so far, hit the like button. I would really appreciate it. And the last thing I want to touch upon is the method that I subscribe to and I use all the time, and that's just going ahead and tweak. So I do this. This is method number 3. I go ahead and I'll just import all my tracks into a new session, and I do the mix prep. Check out this video where I do all the mix prepping. And what I do now is that I select all the regions. In most cases, the tracks are a bit hot to my taste, so I'll turn it slightly down until I get a decent -3 to -6 dB on my master out. That's a nice level to work with. And then I start adjusting everything as I hear. I usually mute the vocals and only do instrumental first, and then I'll set my levels. And I also like to do after the fact tweak the regions and the fader as I did in method number 1, but it's really not that important. It's time consuming, and many times I prefer to just leave it as it is, and maybe at a later stage I will bounce that track to a new track, and then I will have the fader at unit again. So that's another way of doing it if it becomes an annoyance when I'm mixing. So I think that's the simplest method, but it's also the method that will give you wrong results fastest if you are inexperienced when it comes to mixing. If you are new to mixing and you have experienced a lot of frustrations when mixing, and if you think it's difficult to get the levels right, at least I did when I was starting out. That was one of the hardest parts, getting the vocal to sit well in the mix, for example. Starting off like I did with method 1 or maybe even method 2 is my suggestion for you then. And the next step now, as we have the static mix going, we're pleased with it, is to apply some processing. And if you check out this video, I go through how I process this exact mix, and I don't use a lot of plugins. I will go through EQing, compression, saturation, and a bit of a side chaining. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I see you in that video. Peace!